With the books, it's just a larger time commitment. Like my new book on Thurgood Marshall, just published this year, it took 5 years. My biography of Sammy Davis Jr. took 6 years. Biography of Sugar Ray Robinson took 5 years. And so, books are just more emotionally involved, more in depth, a lot more travel, a lot more research.
So yeah. You say the longer the book, the longer the research process.
Yeah, it tends to work that way. The fascinating thing about the newspaper article is that it's very time conscious, so I'll go on the road, research a story, I'll interview people, and the story generally gets in the paper within like 3 days to a week. And so there's instant gratification
So
with the newspaper story. Yeah. So, one is harder because of the time approach. And the other, in a way, has its own challenges because you're on the ground and you really want to get the story right. I think more people in Hollywood have been taking a look at my other books.
So you're getting that name recognition.
Yeah.
You're starting to look more into what you're writing.
Yes, like my Sugar Ray Robinson book has been optioned for the movies, and my current book, Showdown, about Thurgood Marshall, has also been optioned for the movie. So I think the success of the Butler, which played here in this country, and of course, but it also played in 75 foreign countries. And so the movie has played all over the world. And people, when you say the Butler, they instantaneously know what you're talking about. This movie that came out recently. Definitely.
Definitely got good reviews.
What was one of the nicest things about the story is that there haven't been a lot of civil rights themed movies in this country. Filmmakers have just been lazy, have just not been, sharply looking at those stories, and they should have been. And so this movie, for instance, it was the first movie made that portrayed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the big screen. Now, he's been portrayed on TV a lot, on cable a lot, but never on the big 60-foot movie theater screen as a full-fledged character. And so,
which is important.
It's very important. Yep. Well, I thought that then Senator Obama would win the election when nobody else thought he would win. And I thought it would be great to find an African American who worked in the service field in the White House, who was there before the era of segregation. And I thought it would be great if Obama won, and if this person who had worked at the White House, when they couldn't even vote, the symbolism of that, I just, knew that that would be an epic, emotional, very sensitive story to tell. But the senator had to win to really make things pop. And and when I went looking for somebody who worked in the service industry at the White House, I had no idea, of course, that I would find Mr. Allen, somebody who worked for 8 presidents over 35 years. That's just something.
You can't make that up.
No.
Honestly, it's just one of those things that turns out to be
amazing. It still gives me goosebumps. the book was an accident. First, the story came out, and Hollywood bought the rights to the story. There was no book yet. Then years later, we start filming the movie, and I was on the movie set, and I seen all these great actors. You know, there are 7 Oscar winners in this movie. There's no other movie in the history of America that has had 7 Oscar winners. So that's pretty amazing.
Incredible cast.
Yeah.
Great screenplay.
Yep.
Together makes it.
I had said, goodness gracious, somebody should write a book to capture this moment of filming this movie, you know, down here in Louisiana. You know, somebody should capture this moment. And Terrence Howard, one of the actors in the cast, was walking by and he said, "You're the writer, so you ought to write that book." And so that really is how that germ of an idea started. I was very afraid to take on books. You know, books seemed so intimidating, you know, way out there. I knew no authors when I was in college or growing up. You know, I'd never met, you know, somebody who made a living as a writer. And when I was at the Boston Globe, you know, I started writing these long feature articles. And then I got this book contract to write a book about a trip I took down the Mississippi River for the newspaper. And then I said to myself, wow, how do you write a book? And a friend of mine on the staff said, okay, Will, you've written this 4,000 word magazine article. And so a book is like 115,000 words.
Multiply it a couple of times.
And so you just stack one article on top of the next, on top of the next, on top of the next, until you have like 50 articles, and there's your book. Now, that's a very simplified way to put it, but it really took away the fear, because I knew I could write a 4,000 word article, and if I did it again and again and again 50 times, then there's my book. Yes, I think why. I mean, I really think here's why. I think most people who go into journalism come from well-heeled families, well-to-do backgrounds. It always has been a field that's sort of been considered elitist journalism. And how many people were willing during that campaign to look for somebody who worked in the White House Rose Garden, or a maid, or a butler? I just don't think people's antenna was pointed in that direction. But mine was, because I come from a very humble background, and I saw something, you know, very heroic in this man's life. 35 years at the White House, you know. Some of those years he couldn't even go back to his hometown and vote because of the color of his skin, and yet he never quit his job. You know, so that's the story of a hero, if you ask me, and that, you know, really appealed to me as a story of American history, and a story against the backdrop of the first African American president. We need more stories about, you know, about the working poor, how hard it is to make it in this country, because we all know that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. We really know that, and we need stories to really bring that alive for the senators and the Congress people.
Yeah, the people that
Yep,
definitely.
we really do. I think, there was a lot of stories about Wall Street and the subprime housing crisis and, all of the damages that Wall Street did. I think we need a whole level of stories to get down at ground level of some of these families in Kentucky and Alabama and Mississippi and write about how they are surviving with little or nothing in this land of plenty. It is a land of plenty, but there are too many people scuffling day to day. I really encourage them to get out in the community, to interview people.
Get that hands-on experience.
Yeah, I really don't want quotes that are emailed in.
Yeah, those are to me. I agree.
There's just something that sounds, I don't know, sort of plastic about them. Shoe leather reporting in the cold, wind, rain, or whatever. I think it's important for the student to get out and go and knock on doors, and
Really
ask
chase that
questions.
story.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to tell stories now. It's not the same newspaper landscape that it was 15, maybe 20 years ago. But that should not stymie someone's creativity because of the simple fact there's a lot of ways that you can get your story out there. And so if you are a young writer, and you feel somewhat challenged by the venue that you'll find to tell your story, that should inspire you more. And because a good editor or a good magazine or a good TV station, they will get your story on air or they will get your story into print. Yes. Good stories don't die. Good stories always find a home. Well, yes, the actor David Oyelowo, who played Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma, and he was also in The Butler, he was one of the sons, he has just signed on to play Sugar Ray Robinson based on my book that came out in 2010 called Sweet Thunder, about the 1940s, 50s era prize fighter Sugar Ray Robinson. And the people who made The Butler, Pam Williams and Sheila Johnson, have just bought the rights to my newest book, which has just come out, called Showdown, Thurgood Marshall and the Supreme Court Nomination That Changed America. So I have 2 movies
They're on their way.
in the pipeline. So fingers crossed that they get made.